Yay.
It's working. All right. So just as a quick reminder, we didn't cover a T confidence interval last time, so I'm covering that really quickly today. Also, I checked with the library. I know a few people went down there. Did you see they're like tearing apart the rooms? It's a big mess. So we will be here. I asked if we could be there tomorrow, and he goes, I don't think so. So we'll just plan on being here tomorrow. If you have your laptop like Aaron, bring it. That's fine. All right. So, okay. So we wanted to do the T confidence interval. Let me give you the formula on the board really quickly. It's almost identical to the Z confidence interval for one. So actually, before we give you the formula, how do you decide whether to use a T statistic or a Z statistic?
When you don't have the sigma.
Yeah. So do I know the population standard deviation? Okay. And what are the two answers to that question?
What?
The two answers to this question are?
Yes or no?
Yes or no. Okay, and you're like, what? You asking me a simple question? I can't answer that. Okay, so if it's yes, then what do we use?
If it's yes, we use C.
Yes, we use Z, and if it's no,
we
use T. Okay? Now, do you guys remember the Z confidence interval formula?
Yes.
For a mean? Not to be confused with the
data minus mean.
proportion. Okay? No, the confidence interval. You're giving me the hypothesis test. Anybody remember? X bar plus or minus Z sub alpha over 2 times sigma over the square root of n. Okay? So that's what it is if you're using the Z formula. And if for the T formula, it's almost identical. There's only two differences. Okay? It's going to be X bar plus or minus T sub alpha over 2 times S over the square root of n. Okay? So the formulas are very similar. All right? Now, I got a big shiner right there. Let's see if we can turn off.
Yeah.
There, now you'll be able to see it on the video. Okay? All right, so this is the formula we're going to concentrate on today. Now, by the way, I didn't realize, because I didn't look at it very closely, I just assumed that everybody's T interval was the same. Now, Bettina called me, was that Thursday or Friday?
Yeah, Friday.
Friday, and she said that the table is a little bit different than the book. Okay, so I didn't realize it was a two-sided table, but if you look at the bottom, the very bottom two lines in your book, it says one-sided P and two-sided P. Okay, if you look at the one-sided P, that is exactly like my table. But then this table becomes exactly like my table, only my table's better because I have more degrees of freedom. Okay? And most of them, I've never seen a two-sided T table before, so that was kind of a surprise. So anyway, so just realize the column headings are at the bottom, not the top. Okay? And then it's exactly the same. Okay? So apologize, I didn't notice that. In fact, you know what's funny, Bettina? I taught this all last semester and nobody ever told me that, and the semester before, and nobody ever said, hey, your tables are different. So my students apparently didn't even look. They just used my table because that's the one that we will be tested on.
Bettina is outstanding.
What's that?
Bettina is an outstanding student.
She is an outstanding student, I agree with
I
that.
also brought that up in class on Thursday because ours didn't go to 39 and yours did.
What's that?
I also brought that up in class on Thursday because you're like trying to find 39, but ours only went from 30 to 40 instead.
Yeah, we did notice that, yeah. So that was kind of funny. All right, so here's what we're going to do. So let's use example 20.3 on page 455. I'm going to share my screen here. And we're going to figure out how to do a T confidence interval. Okay, so psychologists studied the size of tip in a restaurant when the next day's weather would be good was written on a bill. Here are the tips from 20 patrons. Is use a, what does it say? Well, I'll just put confidence interval to determine if the interval is different than 20%. Okay, so 20.8, 24.9, I'm just going to put them all in here in a single column because it's easier. A lot of times they write it in the book across because it's easier to, or it takes up less space, which I agree, it does take up less space. Can't talk and type at the same time. This is hard.
So I got a question.
Okay.
You're actually going to use a confidence interval different than 20% because in there it brings up 95 at the end after you find everything.
Okay, it sounds like you're mixing up numbers. So ask that question after I get done typing this again, because it's hard for me to do two things at once. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. I think it's still useful to go through the 7 steps, even though we're actually not doing a hypothesis test, because I think that'll actually help clear up some things. So whether we were doing a hypothesis test or a confidence interval, the only difference is we're using a slightly different formula, okay? So what are your 7 steps? Find the numbers, okay? So here are the tips from 20 patrons. Is there 20 there? Always double check me because, okay, there is. Because it may say 20 and then there's 19 here. And it will because I'm stupid.
19, we would just use N as 19.
Yes, you would. Yeah. Use the actual, if you have data, use the data. Okay? So it says 20 patrons, so
N equals 20.
N equals 20. Use a confidence interval.
U equals 0.2.
Okay, so what's my alpha? 0.05. Okay, which means my confidence is 95%. Okay, that's another way to say. So alpha and confidence interval are related. Okay, to determine if the interval is different than 20%, what's 20%? 0.2, that's the mu, right? That's what we think people should be tipping. Okay? Didn't it used to be 15%?
Yes.
Why has it gone up? Because employers don't want to pay their guys? That's crap. Do you know New York has a restaurant that does not allow tipping? They actually pay their waiters and waitresses and everybody.
It's only like this.
No one even served you. It's just
Now, by the way, did you know? Did you know that?
Yeah.
Do you know why we have tipping? Did you know that that's racist?
What?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because back in this after the Civil War, they didn't want to pay black people to serve, and so they said, "Well, you can work for free, and they'll just tip you."
What?
That's how tipping came in the United States.
Yep, and nowhere else around the world usually does tipping.
Nowhere except for the U.S. does tipping. So it was so that
It's
black
offensive if
people.
you do that.
just out of the goodness of their heart, we would say, well, you can work for free, but if the customer pays you, good for you. Like, is that crap or what? Tipping should be abolished. Anyway, sorry. There's your social commentary for the day. Social history. You thought this was a math class. I just taught you some history. How about that? Okay. So anyway, is there anything else we need? So that's going to be S, right? Standard deviation is right here. Did y'all figure out how to find this on your calculator?
Yeah, good old YouTube.
Okay, and is there anything else we need?
X bar.
We need our X bar. So that is what?
22.21.
How'd you find that?
Does it in the book, and also on my calculator it state that besides.
But how would you do it if you didn't have the book?
That's
How would you do this
terrible
with
phrase.
that terrible phrase that begins with an A? Average. I had a student that every time I would say that, and then he would say, "Curse Bill Gates."
That's funny.
All right, 22.21. All right, so step number 2 is
Determine
Hypothesis. Oh, no, quantitative. and
quantitative or categorical.
And I'll decide on which one to use.
And it's what? Quantitative. Okay. Step number 3,
Find the null.
the null. Technically, you don't need to do this but I think it's actually useful for students to do it because it'll help you to think through the
Especially
confidence
at the
interval.
end.
Yeah. Okay. So the null hypothesis is mu equals 0.2
Doesn't equal 0.2.
is different. This is going to be, this just says different than 20%, right? Okay. So mu is different than 20%. Okay. Step number 4, find the test statistic. In this case, it's a formula. So we're going to be using, instead of finding the T formula, we're going to use this T formula, right? So this is X bar plus or minus T, I'm just going to T sub alpha over 2 times S divided by the square root of N.
This is in the book that talked about the confidence intervals around the T-score.
But we don't have that's
This is bonus material
The
from,
T-score?
we went through.
No, it's different.
Okay. All right. Now, there's a couple other things that we forgot to get on here that we're going to need in order to do this. We need our T sub alpha over 2, right? We also need our degrees of freedom.
I wonder what our degree of freedom could be.
11.
That's 19.
Right?
I didn't.
Where'd you get 11 from?
I don't know.
Okay, 19 degrees of freedom because
There's
20 minus 1. Okay? All right, so I've got my 19 degrees of freedom. Hopefully I have my awesome chart here. Is it here? I pinned it. That's going to be easier to find now. Okay, that's I'm even on the T. Okay, I'll blow this up. We're doing 19 degrees of freedom, right?
At 95%.
19 degrees of freedom. Okay, now let's think about this for a second. My alpha is 0.05, so which column do I look at? No, not 0.05.
Oh, double.
Because confidence intervals are always, always, always two-tailed in our class. You can actually find a one-sided if you wanted, but yeah. So we're going to look at the 0.025 column because we want 2.5% in each tail, right? Now, did we draw a picture to help us out there?
No.
No, that's why we messed up. Okay, should I draw my picture?
You want to.
Let's draw it just to make sure. Okay. So we've got a confidence interval. My alpha equals 0.05. So it's going to be a two-sided. Confidence intervals are always two-tailed in our class. Okay. So if my alpha is 0.05, I want half of it here and I want half of it here. And the half is .025 and .025. That's why I look at the .025 column. Okay? Does that make sense, Aaron?
So I just have a question. What's the difference between this T1 and the one that we did before?
What's the difference? Okay, so this is a confidence interval. This is the confidence interval formula. The hypothesis test is T equals X bar minus mu over S over the square root of n. So you use all the same information, it's just formatted differently.
Okay, so one you ask for the confidence interval, and another one you might ask for hypothesis test.
Right.
Okay.
And I might ask you for both, which I do on the final project.
Oh, I
I want you to do
Oh
both
my
of
God,
these.
that's for the quiz.
Okay? And you know what's funny to me? I think most people prefer the confidence interval to the hypothesis test. I don't know.
I'm opposite.
You're opposite?
Yeah, I use it for sure.
And they'll disagree. And then you'll tell me that they agree. And I'm like, no. If they disagree, you probably made a math mistake. And you got to figure out if you made the math mistake here or here. And some of you can't tell. Now, there are rare instances where the math is correct and they disagree, but they're very rare instances. I would be shocked. But the point of the matter is, you've got a group of 3 to 4 people, right? Most of you? And so you should be able to put your 4 heads together or 3 heads together, whatever you got in your group, and say, oh, we made a mistake, okay? But if you come to the presentation and these disagree, you should tell me they disagree. You'll get more points than if you said they agree when they don't agree. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay? So make sure, remember these are due next week.
Yep.
Make sure that you give them to your friends, your group members, so that everybody can look at them and decide together if they are right or wrong. Because when we get there and Aaron says, hey, Bettina did this all wrong, I shouldn't get a bad grade, and I'll say, you should have looked at it together. You're getting the same grade. Okay? Now, of course, Bettina's not going to mess up, but I just used that as an example.
You can
Okay?
say I was gonna mess up.
All right, does that make sense? Okay? So make sure you get this done early. Like this weekend, they should be done. Okay? Now, all right. So let's go back to our thing here. Okay, what's my t-score? What should it be?
2.093.
2.093. So this is 2.093. What's this value?
Negative.
Negative 2.093, which is why we have the plus and the minus. Okay? That's exactly why, because you're going to add it, you're going to subtract it. Okay? All right, so my T sub alpha is 2.093. Oops. Come back. 2.093, and you get that from the chart. Oh, by the way, do you think you can do it with the computer?
A lot easier. You just.
It's not t-disk, though. It's t dot inverse.
What?
Mm-hmm. Because you're not finding the p-value, you're finding the critical value. You're doing it backwards.
That's on.
Oh, this is like.
Okay? So it's t dot inverse. Which one do you think you should use?
2 tails.
The two-tailed one. Okay? Because confidence intervals are always, always, always in our class two-tailed. Okay? What do we put in for the probability? What kind of a confidence interval do you want? What?
Another.
Oh,
Christian?
11. 19, sorry.
Christian, what do you think? What's our confidence interval?
We put up there that confidence equals
0.95.
Yeah, 95% confidence interval, right? Put it in as a decimal. And your degrees of freedom? 19 degrees of freedom. You can either type them or click them.
Yeah, we
Okay.
stalled enough.
We stalled enough for Andrew that he's like, oh, I should have missed the quiz by now. But we're doing bonus material. It's not going to be on the quiz, by the way. That's okay. All right. Oh, except for,
But it will be on the
look,
test.
do those numbers look the same? No, they're way off. So rather than 95% confidence interval, what are we supposed to put? Put our alpha. It's a little confusing. Now they're the same. So in this case, it's asking for what do you want in the tails, not what do you want in the middle.
Okay.
Okay, you're looking for 5% in the tails. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. So practice that. Test is next week.
Yeah, let's
You
do
don't want to be
it.
getting a
Let's go.
0.6 when it's
Is
2.093.
next week?
Yeah, our finals next week.
Gosh.
Yeah, the class is over
Yeah,
next
class is
week.
over next week.
And do you know where I'm going next week after the day after finals?
To Mexico.
The Caribbean.
I'm going to Mexico.
We're gonna go see some dolphins.
Our
All
friend's
right.
doing great white shark diving.
So let's finish this off and then we'll take our quiz. So here's what you should generally do. Do the lower and the upper. And so the lower is going to be what, Chandler? Tell me what to type. I'm trying to find the confidence interval and I'm using this formula.
Lower would be the -2.
What's
Just
that?
subtract it.
X bar is what?
Oh, we're doing it? Right.
You don't know what X bar is? It's in step number 1,
22.
0.2.21. So it looks like these people are tipping pretty well, right? Okay. And we're going to add or subtract. We're going to subtract on the lower side. Subtract what? What's T? 2.093. Do you want to use the computer or we'll use the computer value? Will be more accurate than the table. Okay. And then what?
Multiply your S.
Can't read that. Aaron, can you read it?
What's that?
It's an S.
We're going to multiply it by S, right? What's S? How come you don't sit closer, Chandler? You don't like to see the board?
Oh, you're talking about
Can't read
Is
my
that a
head.
T? Am I looking?
T sub alpha over 2, we've already taken care of that. Times S, what's S?
Samples?
7962517.
Which in this case is
1.9.
1.96, right? Divided by the square root of
20.
Just 20. You're right. Keep it on.
20. Okay? Now, let me show you, this is pretty cool. So on the low side, we got 21. Now, if you copy it up here in the formula bar, it will work better. If you copy, whoops, if you copy and paste it, it didn't work. But if you copy it up here in the formula bar, Control C to copy, Control V to paste, you should get the exact same value. What's the only single thing I need to change?
Plus.
Change that minus right there to a plus. Okay?
Man, I wish I was computer literate.
All right, now step number 5
P squared.
is your p-value, and the answer to that is
5.
does not apply to confidence interval. Okay?
And neither does the accept or reject.
You use the A word. Go rinse out your mouth.
Fail to.
The step 6,
or reject.
reject the null or not. Okay? So look at these. So the null is what? Remind me what the null is.
No.
The null is 20%. Okay? is 20% in my confidence interval?
No.
No, so therefore I reject the null, which means what?
People are tipping more.
The conclusion is,
So we can decide.
now let me give you a slightly, well, there's two conclusions I'd like you to come up with. I'd like you to come up with the standard conclusion that we've done with the hypothesis test, but I'm also going to give you a standard thing here. We are blank % confident that the mean, that the, whatever it is you're measuring, the blank is between blank and blank. And that's your, usually you put these in parentheses. Okay? So that's your generic statement, but I've also, would you like to know, I want you to also answer this question. Is the tip different than 20%?
Which is obvious, yes.
Okay? So we'll do it both ways. Okay? So, Cade, can you fill in the blanks for me? Can't blame this on my handwriting.
I can't blame you, it's small.
That's because you don't sit in the front.
Well, you usually have it bigger, just say, usually.
Good.
How's that, Cade? Can you see?
Good, yeah, thank you.
What are you sitting in the back for?
Yeah, not in the back.
There's nobody behind you.
3 rows back.
All right. Anyway.
If I was sitting this in an NBA game, I'll be excited, but,
Yeah. You don't care about seeing LeBron James in the front of the class. All right. We are 95% confident that the, what are we measuring?
the margin of that.
Mean tip with good weather is between 21.29, and it's always the lower number first. Don't write it backwards. And 3.13%.
I thought we weren't allowed to use the word reject on that.
We're not allowed to use the word accept.
We can't use reject in the conclusion either.
Okay.
That's true. And then we definitely don't want to use the A word. Tina's over there swearing. All right. So now, okay. So that's good. Is the tip different than 20%? There is evidence that. Don't just tell me it's different. Is it higher or lower?
It's higher than 20%.
The mean tip is higher than 20%. Okay? Even though it just said different here, nobody wants to know if it's different. They want to know if it's higher or lower. Do you have cheapskate customers or do you have good customers?
Depends on if you go to a buffet or not.
Now, are you supposed to tip at a buffet?
Yeah, you're supposed
You
to
serve
tip 10%
yourself.
at a buffet.
Is that true? I think tipping should be outlawed and they should just pay the servers. Who's with me? It's a vestige of racism, okay? Just pay them. Don't make me pay them. All right. Any other questions? We took a lot of time on that. We're not going to have time to finish this today. Okay?
We could always skip the quiz.
Oh, we can't skip the quiz.
Oh, dang it.
All right. So there's your T thing. Okay? So let's take our quiz.